Heaven was silent, but there was something burning in the heights. No sound on earth could capture what was moving above the clouds. And what if, at this very moment, an invisible battle was being fought for you, a war with no headlines, no visible explosions, but with impacts that touch your mind, your body, your decisions. The Bible speaks of angels, but what it reveals subtly, almost like a whisper hidden between verses, is that these beings are not just messengers, they fight. They face forces beyond our understanding, and when they go into battle, it is not symbolic, it is real, invisible, but devastating. These angelic wars have shaped the world since before human existence, and even today, as you go about your routine, they continue, silent, constant, as if heaven breathed between spiritual swords and eternal commands. Today, we will walk through 4 forgotten portals. 4 moments in biblical revelation when angels stepped out of the shadows and entered into war. A rebellion that began before time, a prayer that triggered a clash in the heavenly realms, an army that surrounded a city but was part of God's plan, and a judgment that crossed through doorways, separating life and death. If you believe that more people need to hear truths like these, if you feel that this kind of spiritual content must continue, then subscribe now, leave a like, and share it with someone. Every comment, every click helps us keep this mission alive. You are part of this, and it might be through your gesture that someone else understands. Heaven is at war, and it is on our side. And if you have never seen an angel, maybe one has already fought for you. The visible world is only part of the story. There is a spiritual war happening now all around you. You are in the middle of it, even without seeing it. Comment now, Army of Light, because heaven may seem distant, but the next battle may already be being fought in your name. And before there was land, cities, or human hearts, there was a cry in heaven, not of praise, but of rupture. Lucifer was beauty in spiritual form. His radiance was not just light, it was reflection. He reflected the glory of the Creator with such pure intensity that the other angels would bow before what they saw in him. But at some point, that reflection stopped pointing to the throne and began to desire the throne. There were no thunders, there were no earthquakes. The first crack in the universe happened in silence, in the most unlikely place, the heart of an angel. There, the seed of pride was born, and with it, the desire to rise without submission. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, as it is written in the book of Isaiah chapter 14, verse 13. The words were not shouted, but they were felt, and in that instant, something changed forever. Ezekiel, in chapter 28, describes the fall of that glory. Radiance was corrupted, perfection turned into ambition. But it was John, in the book of Revelation chapter 12, who saw what came next. War in heaven. The scene is not symbolic. It is literal. Swords that do not cut flesh but essence. A clash between loyalty and ambition, between the archangel Michael and the one who dared to desire the glory that belongs only to the eternal. Lucifer was not alone. 1/3 of the angels were seduced. They weren't deceived by lies. They were drawn by the promise of power. They longed to be worshipped. They craved autonomy, and that cost them the eternity they once knew. So there was war, spiritual war in its purest form. The first conflict in creation was not between light and darkness. It was between corrupted light and faithful light, between what was beautiful and what remained holy. And when heaven cried out, it was not in pain, it was in justice. Michael did not hesitate. He did not question, did not argue, did not deliberate. He fought. Because there are moments when heaven does not negotiate. It simply declares who still stands. And in that invisible, eternal, decisive battle, the enemy fell. But he did not fall as if stumbling. He was cast down, expelled, removed with fury. Because where the Most High reigns, there is no room for ego. The presence of God does not negotiate with rebellion. The book of Revelation reveals that he was cast down to the earth, and with him came chaos, the seed of rebellion that now manifests in every addiction, every pride, every idolatry and war. It all began there, with a desire aimed in the wrong direction, with an angel who forgot that radiance without a source is only darkness. And so the first invisible battle was won, not by numbers, but by loyalty, by obedience, by the holiness of Michael, who did not seek glory for himself but only defended the glory of the Father. This story is not a celestial legend, it is a spiritual warning, because the same pride that destroyed Lucifer can slowly grow in any human heart, and just like in heaven, it always begins in silence. Perhaps the true spiritual war does not begin in the streets or in governments. Perhaps it is born in the unseen depths of every soul. And if a perfect angel fell because of ego, what does that say about us? There is something deep in this. The first enemy of God was not man, it was an angel. That changes everything, that reveals that the battlefield of human history began long before Eden, and that there is an ancient, active spiritual fury that still influences the world today. But for every fall, there is a Michael. For every rebellion, there is justice. And for every invisible battle, heaven still has warriors. The question is, when the next cry echoes, will you be on the side that remains? But what if the cry was no longer in heaven, but here among us, because the war continued and the battlefield descended to the earth? Heaven did not cry out just once. As the centuries passed, the invisible war came down to earth and began to touch men who walked with God. Among those men, one stood out for his consistency and for the silence he endured. Daniel, the same who faced lions without fear, now faced an emptiness even more threatening, the absence of an answer. For 21 days he prayed, fasted, waited, and heaven seemed silent. There were no visions, no dreams, no words, only the weight of a cry that rose with no reply. But what Daniel didn't know was that the silence on earth was not the silence of heaven. It was, in truth, an invisible battle being fought in the air. According to chapter 10 of the book of Daniel, the angel himself reveals, "From the first day that you set your heart, your words were heard." But he was hindered, detained, confronted by a spiritual being, the Prince of Persia. There, in the space between the visible and the eternal, there was real spiritual warfare. The message had already been released, but it could not get through. The messenger was surrounded. It's hard to imagine an angel sent by God, blocked for 21 days, not by walls but by a territorial demonic force. As described in Daniel chapter 10 verse 13, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. And it is at this point that biblical revelation breaks any notion of passive spirituality. Heaven acts, but hell resists. And in the middle of it all, there is a man praying, unaware. Then something happened. Michael stepped in. The same archangel who cast Lucifer out, and as Daniel chapter 10 verse 21 says, "Michael, your prince, came to help me." He now intervenes on behalf of a single prayer. That says much about God. He is majestic but intimate. He rules the heavens but moves the universe for a single heartfelt plea. Michael's presence turned the battle, and the angel finally broke through the resistance, reached Daniel with the answer, with the vision, with the destiny. As the prophet bowed before the glory, the angel touched him and gave him strength. And there, on the ground of the earth, Daniel understood that every sincere prayer is more powerful than we imagine. Because in the spiritual realm, prayer is command. It releases angels, challenges resistance, initiates conflict. This story teaches us something profound. Not all silence is absence. Sometimes it is battlefield. Perhaps you have been waiting for days, weeks, even years, and think nothing is happening. But maybe, just like Daniel, you are not being ignored. You are being protected, defended, supported by a war you cannot see. This invisible battle described in Scripture is a rare revelation. It shows that the spiritual world is not static, it is dynamic. That angels are not heavenly decorations, they are active warriors, and that divine protection is not automatic, it is activated by faith. Daniel did not know what was happening in the heavens, but he continued, even without answers, even without signs, even without guarantees, and that is what changed everything. Spiritual warfare is real, but it does not defeat the faithful, it shapes them. Because while hell tries to block, heaven prepares reinforcements. And when those reinforcements arrive, nothing can stop them. If you feel like you are praying in the dark, keep going. Because it may be that at this very moment, someone is fighting for your answer. Daniel's prayer had ended, but the spiritual war continued, now on another front. Because the invisible battle does not choose time or geography. It crosses centuries, kingdoms, and cities, and one day it surrounded a man, not with swords, but with fear. The sun had not yet touched the rooftops when Elisha's servant stepped outside. He froze in his tracks, his breath caught. Surrounding the city, horses, chariots, enemy warriors on every side, an entire army driven by a single goal, to capture the prophet of God. Terrified, he ran back. His words trembled. "Oh no, my Lord, what shall we do?" But Elisha did not move. His eyes did not deny the reality, but they saw beyond it, because true divine protection is not in what is seen, it is in what is known. And Elisha knew. The prophet then prayed, not for deliverance, not for destruction, but for vision. "Lord, open his eyes so that he may see." And in that instant, as told in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 6, verse 17, the spiritual realm was torn open before the young man. Fear was still there, but now so was fire. Entire mountains were revealed, filled with horses and flaming chariots, an invisible army surrounding Elisha with heavenly authority. Heaven was already in position before the enemy even reached the gate. The spiritual war did not wait for the cry, it anticipated the attack. This moment reveals something precious. God does not protect only when we ask. He has already positioned the victory while we are still sleeping. What the servant lacked was not a miracle. It was discernment. He needed to see what was already there. Elisha was not alone. No child of God is. Even when everything seems to point to defeat, there are silent armies all around us. The invisible battle was never a myth. It is a real biblical revelation. And when the eyes are opened, fear loses its grip. The enemy was numerous, but not sovereign. Then Elisha prayed again, this time not to open eyes, but to close them, and the enemies were blinded. This divine reversal is profound. The ones who seemed to see clearly became lost, and the one who thought he was surrounded was the one who had heaven all around him. This is not just a story of victory, it is a spiritual warning. Because how many times have you feared what you could see, not knowing what surrounded you? How many nights have you slept surrounded by spiritual warfare, but also by divine protection? Elisha's story reminds us that not all salvation comes with thunder. Sometimes it arrives with chariots of fire that no one else can see. And if your eyes are opened, you will realize that you were never unprotected. You may not see it, but God has already stationed his angels around you. They do not appear to impress. They appear to carry out orders, and when heaven decides to protect, no human army can stop it. The servant saw, the prophet knew, and we must trust, because in the middle of any siege, the invisible battle continues, and heaven once again is on our side. Not every invisible battle takes place among mountains or celestial armies. Some unfold in narrow streets beneath fragile roofs, behind doors that were marked or not. Because spiritual warfare is not only cosmic, it is also domestic. And on that silent night in Egypt, the conflict was not announced. It arrived. The 10th plague did not come with thunder. There was no earthquake, only a command, a silent mission entrusted to a single angel. The order was clear: pass through the entire land of Egypt and carry out judgment. No human sword could stop him. No wall could block him. It was God himself executing justice with invisible hands. While the Hebrews were preparing the lamb, the angel was already drawing near. The blood on the doorpost was not decoration. It was a sign, a spiritual marker, a divider between life and death. Exodus chapter 12 verse 23 reveals, "The Lord will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you down." It was more than physical protection. It was covenant activated by obedience. Outside, everything seemed calm, but in the invisible realm, there was movement. An angel in absolute silence was fulfilling what many ignored, that the justice of God also walks with spiritual feet. And as he passed, he left no footprints, only absence. Exodus chapter 12 verse 29 says that at midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, and where there was no blood, there was mourning. This was not a random attack. It was judgment. The angel was not sent for vengeance, but for holiness, because there are moments when spiritual warfare manifests as separation between those who listen and those who resist, between those who believe and those who ignore. The power of this moment lies in the detail. Salvation was not in fighting, but in marking. It wasn't about strength, it was about faith. The blood on the doorframe was not magic. It was visible trust, a spiritual act with eternal consequences. The Bible does not describe this angel's face. It doesn't speak of wings or light, because the focus was not on him, it was on the decision. That night proved that spiritual warfare doesn't happen only in the heavens. It enters homes, it weighs on choices, it responds to covenants. And perhaps today, the greatest invisible battle is still this one. Who has their house marked? Who lives as one who believes? Because the angel passed, but the principle remains. What protected that night still protects today, but the mark is still essential. But what if there's no more time to mark? And what if the next angel does not come as a warning, but as a sentence? Spiritual warfare began in silence, but it will end with a cry, because the day will come when the invisible becomes unavoidable, and heaven, which once fought in secret, will open its gates with declared force. In the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verse 1, John describes, "After these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory." But this angel did not come to announce good news. He came to declare ruin. He did not descend to warn, but to fulfill. And his target was Babylon, not the geographic Babylon, but the spiritual one. A system of pride, impurity, idolatry, and oppression built over centuries, fed by kings, sustained by multitudes. And in the face of this, heaven does not send an army. It sends a single angel with authority enough to bring down empires. This angel cries out with a loud voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." It is not a prediction, it is an execution. While men celebrated power, heaven was already preparing judgment, and when the command comes, there is no negotiation. This is the turning point. In all previous chapters, we saw angels fighting to protect, deliver, announce, but now they do not come to rescue, they come to judge. And this angel, with a light so intense it illuminates the entire earth, brings no sword, he brings a sentence. Because there are moments when spiritual warfare does not call for a cry, it brings a harvest. Divine protection is real, but it does not replace positioning. And when the time for choice ends, the time for confrontation begins. The glory of this angel is not ornamental. It reveals that the justice of God will no longer be hidden. What was spiritual becomes visible. What was symbolic becomes inescapable. And all who mocked judgment will see that it was always approaching. This is the last invisible battle, but now without veils. The warrior of Revelation does not speak for himself. He echoes the voice of the throne, and when he speaks, all else falls silent. Babylon trembles, kings hide, merchants weep, but it is already too late. Heaven was not silent, it was waiting for the right time. This scene is not a movie, it is destiny, and it is not a threat, it is a promise. The end of injustice, of oppression, of spiritual blindness will be brought by angels who are already prepared. The spiritual war that began with pride in heaven will end with justice on earth. And what was sown in darkness will be reaped in broad daylight. But there is something profound in this biblical revelation. The angel cries out, but before that, he descends. He comes from above. He is not formed on earth, does not rise from culture, does not emerge from human systems. He descends with light, with mission, with the end. And when that angel sets foot, there will be no more doubt, no more excuses, no more time. The final battle will be fought with light. And those who chose the side of heaven will no longer need to fight. They will simply behold the victory. He will come, not with a warning, but with authority. And when the last angel descends, there will be no more time to choose sides, only to reap what was lived. But until that day comes, there is one truth no one can ignore. The spiritual war continues, and it is not confined to heaven nor to ancient pages. It walks among us. It touches decisions, whispers into thoughts, changes destinies. You may have never seen an angel, but that doesn't mean one hasn't been with you. Maybe on the days when everything seemed to collapse, someone was silently fighting for your life. Maybe that peace you couldn't explain wasn't luck, it was help. Because not every victory is seen. Some happen in the unseen, between light and darkness, between the voice of God and the screams of hell. The battles we've spoken of are not myths. They are real biblical revelations, not to frighten, but to awaken. They show that more is happening than our eyes can perceive, that our prayers never rise alone, that our homes can be marked or exposed, and that even the deserts have divine watchmen. The world speaks of chaos, but heaven still acts with order, and for every attack there is defense, for every threat, a response. For every servant who prays in silence, for every father who cries out for his children, for every soul that chooses not to give in, there is reinforcement, because the angels of the Lord still encamp around those who fear him, and they do not fail. But God doesn't just want to send angels for you, he wants you at their side, positioned, aligned, watchful, because in the end, what determines the outcome of spiritual warfare is not who has more strength, but who refuses to fight alone. The final question is not whether the battle will come, it has already begun. The question is, where will you be when the cry is heard? In the shadow of doubt, or under divine protection? If you felt that this message woke something up in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone you love, because sometimes what awakens a soul is a word sent at the right time. And if you believe this channel is being used by God, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay with us in this mission. The world is at war, but here we fight with light. May God bless you greatly for being here. A big hug, and until the next video.